wasn't holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through.
All right, guys, welcome to another Note to File Live. I swear one day I will transition seamlessly out of the music. I still haven't figured out how to do it without screwing everything up. I'm going to unmute everybody's mics here. And guys, welcome. I got the usual suspects here. Dan Sfera, Dr. Fox, you guys, welcome.
How's it going?
Very good. And very excited to have on Zane. Zane, man, how's it going?
It's great out here in Baja, California, Mexico. And thanks for having me today. I've been very excited to talk about my journey into Latin America clinical trials.
Yeah, man, that's we talked a little bit before. I'm surprised we've not had the opportunity to meet before, but very excited about it. And man, I tell you what, just let's hear a little bit about your background. I'm just sort of curious a little bit about you, where you've been and where you're at, and take it away, man. Tell us about yourself.
I love it. My name is Zane, and I've been in the industry for 33 years. It seems hard to believe that I started when I was 25 years old in Austin, Texas, at what is PPD, what was originally called Pharmaco back in the day, and started in the phase 1 unit. And we had a great time with that as we built that in Austin. A couple of highlights of that, I probably put in 3,000 healthy subjects to phase 1 trials, and that kind of spurred my career. Some fun along the way. Robert Rodriguez, the director, Spy Kids, El Mariachi, wrote his screenplay in my drug study for his first movie. And so we got a lot of publicity from that at the time. David Letterman came to the unit, actually, and got a lot of publicity in Austin, Texas for that. And then suddenly we were filling trials. People were coming in. All the musicians actually were coming in to pay for their instruments. And they did a healthy phase 1 trial, and they got about $100 a night, which was a lot of money then. Still not bad, but at the time it really went a lot further in about 1990 to 93. And, so I enjoyed that role for a long time, then took the traditional route and became a monitor. And I did that for several years. And then I went into business development for the company, first person promoted internally from operations. A little bit different take of how I would do it. So I started bringing project management with me to the meetings and started closing the deals that way. Opened the West Coast office for PPD about 96. And that's what brought me out to California. After that point, had a couple of different roles, international for Embrask, then owned 2 sites, sold those, went back to independent consulting, and here we are. After doing that for a while, I made the move to go down to Baja, California about 2 years ago. I'm actually on the border of Tijuana and San Diego, for those out there that don't know the location. We literally are about 10 minutes over the border of the hospital that I work with and own a site in. And so its proximity to the United States and Mexico is really unique. We really draw from 2 countries. It is very unusual and very different. And so far, so good. The site is relatively new. We're just accepting our 2nd clinical trial and putting the focus on that. And I'm learning the regulations like everybody else, learning the culture, learning how to slow it down from the American pace that we're so used to, which is snap, snap, snap. Doesn't really work here in that manner. And, just guiding and finding my way through. I've had enormous support from the sponsors that I know. And I think some of them may be actually on this podcast today. So if you're listening, I appreciate it. And so that's kind of where it took me. After 33 years, I find myself in Mexico, owning a research site. My background was psychiatry, neurology, but it's the one thing that we're actually not doing at this time. We're not really focusing on that indication. And that's a little different for me. So it gives me an opportunity to learn some new areas like MS that I've not really been exposed to. And it's been fun. I've got a great team. I'm really proud of the company that I do keep. I do have a female sub-I, and I'm really happy to always have women on my roster. And we're doing it. So, I'm learning like everybody else. I'm hoping today just to kind of tell you what the journey's been like. And it hasn't been near as scary as I was told it would be to get through the regulations, which is nice. And that's what brings me in today. And so hopefully I can answer any questions or kind of give you what I feel like it's going on down here.
Yeah, I mean, and Dan's, feel free to jump in here. I mean, for me, I know almost nothing about research in Latin America and Mexico. I know Sfera has some touch points and dealt with it. Interestingly, right off the bat, you kind of pointed out one that it tends to be things tend to move at a slower pace. I mean, does that seem to be your
Yeah.
observation so far?
And so for my personal preference coming over, I was really looking forward to that. After being in the States so long, actually coming over here, and I live in Rosarito Beach, was about 30 minutes away, to kind of slow it down somewhat and have a little bit more compassionate, hands-on approach to the patients. And, much to my surprise, things have been going on target with the timelines. There has been no jack in the box surprise so far about regulations that I wasn't educated on.
Don't jinx yourself now.
I know, yeah, right. Don't say it too soon, right? We're definitely getting out of getting started, and so far so good. And I do credit that for my regulatory expert within the hospital. We are a private site in the Tijuana Angels Hospital, but we are absolutely 100% private in that. We do draw our patients from the hospital. We're not doing any advertising at this point. We're not accepting any trial that we don't have an internal database or access to at this point.
So the research entity is separate from the hospital. And so it's very much the same way I operate. I'm in a hospital right now, and we're a third party, like sort of acting as vendor on site, managing that infrastructure. So yeah, that was going to be my next question, is what that model or structure looks like.
Yeah, he is like Hightower Research just in Mexico. I mean, that's the model.
Yeah, and so far it's been working out quite well. The CEO is, pretty much in charge of the hospital. I've got every medical department at my beck and call, really. It's so different than the States. We have a medical tower of basically every indication out of the hospital. Again, the one that we're not utilizing right now is psychiatry. I hope to change that, by next year. But it's really nice to be able to call the offices and say, hey, here's what we're looking at. Do you have any patients that might meet this criteria? And the thing that is so shockingly different to me about being in Mexico is the doctors actually refer patients to each other.
Wow.
It's not like we're going to do it.
Shocking.
It
is shocking.
It is shocking.
Brad, Leanne's coming right out with a really great question. I'm really glad you asked that, Leanne. Are your patients exclusively from Mexico, Zane, or do you have any Americans coming over as medical tourists?
Well, that's a very good point. I was going to build on the medical tourism. So hi, Leanne. Thanks for joining today. I appreciate it so much. At this point, 100% of the patients that I'm working with are internal to Mexico. We've got about 1.5 million research naive patients down in this area of Baja. A lot of opportunity there. But yes, the proximity to the States, I'm hoping to draw that as well. So far, since we haven't enrolled anyone, at this point, it is coming exclusively from Tijuana and surrounding areas. So at this point, that's what I'm doing. I do hope by next year, with more exposure with the sponsors, they'll see that they can actually monitor in San Diego and actually come over the border the same day. And we take care of people when they're here. It's almost concierge service. If I don't want them really to drive through here at this point, it's a little bit confusing and overwhelming. If you've never seen the way into Tijuana, it's going to be overwhelming. So we have them walk over the border and we pick them up as soon as they walk over and take them to the hospital. And so far, that's what we're doing with the patients. Again, it's all internal. Next year, I'm trying to determine what the right advertising can be. I think the term clinical trial is just not very well known here. It isn't. I think when vaccines came, people started getting the exposure of what that trial is. But with the regard to medical tourism, which is really the biggest growing thing in this area, that is actually elevating us too with the term clinical trial, because we are tackling those markets, not just cosmetic, but people that might come for cancer treatment, end of life treatment, things of that nature. We're looking at it across the way, but definitely medical tourism is what's booming down here. It's quite remarkable to go out and go through the streets of Tijuana and see these new towers going up dedicated solely for this area. So I think in a year, I think we're going to be able to capitalize off of that growth.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm also interested in, I'm in a hospital. It took me a really long time to get contracted here. It took me a long time to get the concept like really clear, the value proposition, throughout the administration. Did you have any issue with that, or is this something that was the hospital looking for? Or was the value pretty well understood? Or what did you see there in terms of like red tape or
That's a very good question. And for a lark, actually, when I got here, I started Googling and trying to figure out if anybody did clinical trials in Tijuana.
Right.
I said, it'd be great to do this from my home. And I'm going to live here for quite some time now, a commitment. And so basically, when I did approach this group, it had somewhat experience doing some trials, long-term trials, some phase 4, things of that nature that came over with. I was greeted with a warm reception. And, I have to say it was such a nice surprise to identify such a hardcore group of clinicians. And so the CEO has made a mandate. They'd like each of the departments to express an interest in a clinical trial and offer that patient an opportunity when they come in for treatment if we have it. So no, I really did expect a lot of pushback. My biggest detriment is my lack of fluidity in Spanish, which I'm working on. I do find that most of the doctors all do speak Spanish and English, but as you go down through phlebotomy and so forth and so on, the English starts kind of disappearing somewhat in some of the staff. But I feel great walking in there. And again, nothing but warm reception all the way around. The CEO does see the value of increasing this in exposure. Even though it is a chain, the Angels hospitals, they really aren't connected in any other way other than name. And at this point, so I'm not seeing myself doing Mexico City as a satellite at this time or anything like that. I'm just trying to nail down the recruitment opportunities in this specific border area, at least for this following year. And anybody that has ideas about bringing it another way, I'm all ears. I know, Dan, you work in this and co-founder of Latinos for Clinical.
I want to, yeah. Us and LICR, we want to. I'm actually in a border town too, not too far from you, 3-hour drive, on the Arizona side of the border.
Well, let's include that in our triplex, me, you, and Judy.
Yeah. Me, myself, and Judy. Yeah, and you. So I see something like potentially happening in the future. I mean, the blueprint's kind of been done in Miami with the Miami sites doing it in Colombia, more or less. Can't be that different. It should be easier for us. There's not even a need for airplane. Like, I go to Mexico every weekend here. I go to my orthodontist there. I mean, I do a lot of things personally in Mexico, so I don't see why a research site wouldn't work there.
I think one of the things that I've had to really deal with is the perception of Tijuana, the city. It's not exactly a marketing tool from expectations of what they've heard. And Dan, you probably know this. I've had to do somewhat of damage control for this issue. The first thing I did was change the name. We changed it to Baja Clinical Trials. I thought it had a little bit more panache. Kind of represented more what I see going on down here, which is a great opportunity to come spend your weekend, go to the Wine Valley, which we have very close to me.
Incredible wines out there. Incredible.
Yeah. I knew nothing about that until I came down here. I was shocked. You go over the border in Tijuana, it's so congested. You go down the border where I'm at, it's opening up, and then you have wide open all the way to Ensenada. And it kind of looks like what California looked like before everybody moved there. And so, most of my friends, anytime they hear anything about Mexico, whether it's the border to where you're at, Dan, or Matamoros, or anything down, in Texas, they say, how are you doing? And so, of course, Mexico is this huge and different borders and different ports coming in. But it's a perception that people have. I've had monitors and, project managers tell me from drug companies, there's no way they're going to send somebody down here. And they've been very candid about it. And I said, what are your expectations and why do you feel that way? And, I've had various things, but it really comes back to he said, she said. They don't have a primary example of why other than they've heard. And so far at this point, even though I reach out to the sponsors that I've known for years and years, they redirect me to Mexico City. Most all the CROs have an office in Mexico City. Almost all our monitors are coming from Mexico City.
Wow.
And so that was a little bit different than what I expected. I guess I thought I'd pick up the phone and go, okay, now I'm here. Why don't you personally come see it? And, it turns out there is a chain of command, as we know. And, they're sending people to me. And I've had great support from the CROs we know. I would like to do a shout out to Worldwide, including if they're on here today.
Daniel Perez.
Yeah. I've been really fortunate to have the support. Internal recommendations. They haven't worked with the site before, but they've worked with me. So it makes those 33 years well worthwhile on a bad day, And so we're doing it. I am putting a lot of things things in place to run it is if we're getting approval from the FDA in America. Our second trial requires that. And so it's a little bit different when you're going through. My main goal is compliance at the hospital, having everything set up, everything, going through it with a fine-tooth comb. And, you know, it is different for what you're going to get approved in Mexico than it is in the States. But my familiarity is the States. And so far, we're going to do that way. And I think everybody is learning a lot within my staff. It is different. And again, I will go back to one of the things I noticed the most is the sense of urgency. If you're thinking you're going to snap your fingers and get it same day request within at least where I'm at, you're spending a lot of energy that is unnecessary. You know, again, and I like this because, again, the patient care, the hands-on with the patient, hands-on with the staff takes a little bit more time than the way we're running it out with mass numbers in the United States. And I've worked on that side, and I do. So right now, you know, what I'm trying to explain to people is it's just going to be slightly different. Culturally, it's different. I'm liking it a lot. I feel like it's warm and compassion. And I think it's kind of the way I felt when we first started in the clinical trial industry in the States. And as we grew, we got away from some of those core principles, which made us an industry that was interesting or fun. I think in the States now, people are just used to running it a certain way, whether it's effective or not. You know, we're familiar with the system that had some marginal results, but they're still engaged with these companies and doing it. You know, and I met Dr. Fox. He's expanding in a different way, you know, bringing something to the table. Dan is a lot of individuals that I follow out there, but I'm also trying to create a new path for it. And, you know, jokingly, but all serious, I say we're building bridges, not walls here at the border.
I like that. And, you know, you touched on something I've, you know, thought about, but, and a great, you know, sort of point from Jeff here. Is there a cultural difference in the physician-patient relationship that you've seen so far? I mean, I think we know, people who've worked at the site level know that, like, that's a huge determining factor in the success of a trial in terms of enrollment and retention, is just how good that physician-patient relationship is. We're sort of getting, this will lead into my next question, but we're sort of getting, you know, further away sometimes from that relationship in terms of, you know, decentralization and whatnot. Is that a cultural difference that seems to play out in Mexico? Is that in your experience so far?
Absolutely. And I can't see, is my PI, Dr. Blanca Acosta, on?
I don't see across the bottom. We should be able to see across the bottom.
Dr. Acosta, we got to interview you in Spanish on LICR. It's a must. Overdue.
I can't see who's on. I only see Dan and you, Brad, and Dr. Fox. So I don't know who's on there, but hello to everybody that did tune in. I appreciate it. I think
Hola, bienvenidos.
Yeah. And so I would speak on Dr. Acosta's behalf on this. What they primarily use for communication down here is WhatsApp. And that is what they use almost exclusively to track patients. In the previous trials they have run, it's been 100% retention. And a lot of that has to do with engaging in that patient and getting another referral from that patient. And I find that to be very strong here, and pleasantly surprised with this. And I think, again, as we grow in the States, we have gotten away from that. And I don't think it's necessarily intentional that we're doing it, but decentralized has changed things. The changing of the guard. I've been in this business for 33 years, and a lot of people that I know are selling to a site network. And, you know, they're going, and then that PI or staff may have to stay there 2 years. And my question is, who do we call next afterwards? And so the systems that we put in place, and I mean, we really did kind of invent the clinical trial structure in 90 going forward, is different. I do find that if the physician, the PI, sub-I says this is a good thing for you, Dr. Fox, they usually listen and they stay in the trial. And so there is a great trust between the clinical staff and the patient here. And that is a really welcome change for me. You know, I see it and I love it. And when the monitors come, they feel welcome when they come in. I can say that everyone that's ever monitored the hospital has made a verbal commitment to award the trial on the spot. And so something is working. And again, I'm going to put that credit for my clinical team for that. Just an interesting point. When they do come in, although we do the introductions in English, the meeting quickly goes to Spanish. And, the CEO makes the joke, well, Zane knows what's on the slides. And that is kind of true. And I'm able to follow it. But primarily, all the presentations and the evaluation is done in Spanish.
Well, you don't even need English for these slides anymore. You're just
No,
not listening anyways.
Yeah, I really take time to read the protocol before they come in, and my staff has the protocol in front of them, and they've been complimented for the obvious housekeeping items that we do. I think the monitors are happy to see that we actually have inclusion, exclusion out in a highlighter, because it's the way I've done it in the States. I want to bring some of that down here. Initially, they were puzzled by that, saying, we all read it. And I said, yeah, that's good. We're going to make some notes as we go along. And it's worked out really well. And, so yes, it's very different in that sense. When I started off as a monitor, probably back in 92 or 3, there was a lot more hands-on and things weren't so set in stone. And anybody that's been in the business knows how much that's changed. There used to be investigator meetings in Cancun and Puerto Rico, just so different than what we experience now. And now, it's really just a challenge to get people to want to attend those meetings, and so, yeah, it is very different. Good question.
So is there, are decentralized trials as much ado in Latin America so far in your experience as they are here? I know right now that seems to, in real life, not so much, I think, as much as, on LinkedIn. But nonetheless, does that seem to be sort of saturating down there as well?
Not on my end. But I would say probably companies that are more well-established doing major vaccines and the Novartis and the Pfizers and the Mercks might be looking at that. But where I'm at right now, that hasn't been proposed in any of the monitoring plans so far. Good question, though. I saw that pop up. It's a great question.
So I like this one. Jennifer Glass. This is an interesting one for you, Zane. We may have some interesting opportunity for you, but she asks, for people who are waiting to get into the U.S., I assume this is waiting to get into the industry, would they be allowed to volunteer in Mexico to try to get their foot into the clinical research door as clinical research assistants?
Well, I would be happy to take anybody that wants to intern. A short answer for that, we're trying to establish that program within the hospital right now to have people learn about research. But Jennifer, I don't have the answer for that. I want to make sure that I'm clear with the question, though. Are we asking specifically if anyone can come from San Diego, Southern California to participate with us as a group? Or are you asking anything to do with immigration? Just to make sure that I'm clear on the question.
I'm not sure. It depends on interpretation. Allowed to volunteer may even be participation in trials to be trial participants. So you could go either way.
See if she clarifies.
Yeah, we'll wait for Jennifer to clarify.
But to your point, and as a question I was going to ask too, in terms of staffing, because we saw the same thing. We came into a hospital that really didn't have any formal research program. Are you leaning on existing hospital infrastructure and staff, or really just bringing in your own coordinators, from the outside, or a mixture? It sounds like you're trying. Believe me, I can understand
I'll be open
to
to
the pain of trying to educate hospital staff when that can be a challenge in and of itself. But what does your staffing model kind of look like?
So far, it's all internal. And again, I'm working with the team that had conducted trials previously.
Gotcha.
And expanding that. And then internally, we have recruited internal people to join. Some are doing QA, might be the phlebotomist or someone that we can establish as our go-to for that. Some of the trials aren't requesting a lot of patients right now. So we have a little bit of luxury as we groom people for the roles we're going to do. But we are looking at implementing a program in the hospital to get people, some exposure that never would have had an opportunity to work within clinical trials or even know what it is. And I do believe that is just starting. We're trying to kind of round that out, how that's going to work. But I think that we have great interest from some of the younger individuals. One thing that has been interesting to me to be down here is the physicians are so much younger than they are in the States. They go right out in school as they get out of high school, a lot of them. And so doctors, you may come here, you may see a lot of 30-something-year-olds being your doctor. And that's been a surprise to a lot of people that have come down. to see that, because it's usually not quite as young as these individuals are. And so that's been very interesting to see. And so a lot of the physicians and new talent that's coming on, they're open to learning new ideas because they're not really set in stone yet with their behaviors and the way they do things.
I had a question about that, Zane. I was always interested about the PI's motivation. Do you feel as though PI motivations can be different, like in Baja or in Tijuana? PI motivation to do research.
Well, I think, initially, some of the physicians that's been out there, no research, have said, I want to do it. There's too much paperwork, because I went around the hospital saying, hey, I'd love to work with you in this capacity. Actually, the internist used to be the mayor of Tijuana, so I thought he had a great take on it. He said, no, thank you. Too much paper. It is what it is. I have asked what their take is for research. They do like to offer an alternative to the patient, and that's primarily what it is. We're going to have a mandate, offer that patient an opportunity to do a trial if it matches. And I think that's going to be our model going forward with this. We're really not at the point where people are obsessed with recruiting patients for money. We're nowhere close to that model whatsoever. And I'm happy that that's where we're at right now as we're growing. Obviously, clinical trials, it's a business. It's always been a slippery slope to talk about being compensated for recruiting a patient. And the 33 years I've done it, I feel like sometimes we've never got closer to that being a conversation we can have without people, kind of going, oh, we can't really say that. My goal is to run it ethically like I did in the States and, the best care for that patient and hope the drug works. We're not trying to force an outcome whatsoever with that. So good question about that.
I had a quick question. So diversity, this is like the whole push point now for good reason. And it's a dynamic situation. So if you don't have the answer, we all understand. I don't think anyone does. We just want your opinion. The FDA is mandating, hey, we need more diversity. We need the patients in our studies reflective of the actual people that are going to take this drug. Do they accept, let's say they need Latinos, right? Do they accept the data from Mexico if the drug will be used in the U.S.? Or do they want Latinos from the U.S. in their studies?
But that's an absolute great question, Dan, on that. One of the trials I'm working on, we are preparing the data for submission in the FDA. And so, again, our patients are all internally recruited right now, and 99.9 are Latina coming down here. We actually have an Asian population in Tijuana as well, like they do, like Miss Judy Galindo, if she's on, does, and May Calla. And so we do have a little bit about that. And, I would even squeak out 1% of Americans that might come do the trial, primarily maybe oncology and Alzheimer's. I'm looking at, I've actually identified a few. But, with regard to diversity, I'm really happy the FDA is requiring that. It's kind of overdue, in my opinion. But doing the business so long, I can say I did a lot of schizophrenia, and it wasn't very diverse, the patient population whatsoever. Over the 33 years I've been doing it, primarily the patients I had for those trials were Caucasian and African American. Very much 90% of that was. And so I am welcoming the diversification down here. But so far, all of the potential subject patients we have are coming strictly from Tijuana.
Yeah, but do you know if the FDA released anything on, hey, sponsors, if you're going to get your drug approved in the U.S., you've got to have more Latino in your trials. Do they accept the data from Latin American countries, or does it specifically have to be U.S. Latinos?
That is a great question that I've just penciled down. I'd like to circle back to the group on that. I actually don't have the answer for that.
Me either. I know there's ethnic bridging studies too. What's it called? West Coast Clinical Trials used to do ethnic bridging, where they would do phase 1 healthy volunteer, but they would get the Asians, because in California they have the Asian population. But I don't know how this actually works. Maybe someone in the comments says, I think this is an important thing to figure out.
Yeah.
If we're pushing diversity, the industry's gotta do a better job of making this stuff clear to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's great, Dan, and I'm going to take that back and research that. I think that's an excellent point to find out. And again, to the group, everyone listening, I'm also on a dynamic learning curve. I'm really trying to wrap my head around it. It takes a little bit longer to translate documents and read things. It's just part of it. But that is an excellent point to follow up with, Dan.
So Zane, we got some additional clarification on this question. It is immigration. So they're asking if people like sites in Mexico would take volunteers to where the site would be sponsoring an immigration certification, an immigration application.
I think that is an excellent question. And was that Jennifer's question? She's
Jennifer, and then we had a couple, another one.
There's another one here.
Yeah, wisdom.
Okay. That is such a great, interesting point. I've never thought of it. I never have. I know that, historically in the States, I knew people that had nursing placement agencies that sponsored nurses from the Philippines. And it was a similar model up that. It's tricky down here on the border. I think Dan would say, my gut feeling is no. Right now, I would be surprised because of all the hoops you have to go through to even do any immigration, but it is certainly worth taking back. That would be a great opportunity for people, actually. I watch weekly as everybody comes to try to cross over to Tijuana. A lot of people from all around the world are actually coming, Russian, Ukraine, Central America, and they can't get out once they make it to the border wall, if you will. So that's an excellent question to take back. And I do not know the answer to that, but I certainly want to investigate that. For as difficult as they made it for immigration, though, my gut feeling is that's not something that has been approached, but maybe they just never had the right way to ask the question. We can see. I think that's an excellent point. Thank you.
Yeah, worth looking into. And I guess I'm kind of curious too. I mean, again, a lot of my questions are more sort of like operational, as somebody who runs sites, but it's still new, sounds like relatively new for you, in terms of like technology, site-led technology. Are there things that you've brought in, that are working well to help you manage operations? I mean, I don't imagine that would necessarily vary a lot from U.S. to Mexico. Maybe it does, but
there was
okay. It was good to know.
Pre-existing group that handled, websites, IT, and something that came with the hospital. We created a new website. So if you Google it, it's very primitive, guys. When you're looking at it, I just wanted to have something to direct people to at this point. But so far, no, they haven't even been exposed to some of the other technologies that's out there. My initial take was to run around the hospital to see if we had the technology, if we could get on the internet and the bottom floor, things of that nature. There's nothing worse than the monitor coming on going, I can't log on. What's your internet like, and looking. So it looks like every 3 to 4 years, most of these hospitals are upgrading their technology, and it is going very quickly. Systems get outdated very quickly on this. So at this point, we are going to work with what the sponsor provides. And if there's something that's missing, we will add that without any hesitation.
So Zane, I got to ask the question.
Sure.
I got to ask it. So what about money? You're a site in Mexico. How do your budgets look in Mexico? Is there like this assumption that you do things for a lot cheaper so you get really low budgets, or is it about the same? Or how does your budget look from a Latin American site?
Surprising. I have to say, there is a perception, and maybe it was based on some previous exposure to working down in this area, that things were a lot less expensive. And perhaps that's a desire from a sponsor to save money. And it's totally understandable. I feel where I'm at least in proximity to the border, our clinicians are compensated in the same manner they would be in the United States. And, basically our raters, our PI, our sub-I are compensated that way. As we get into some tasks like the EKGs and phlebotomy, I think you can pick up some savings that way. And again, we're not advertising, so there's no money spent from a sponsor for that at this point. But yeah, Dr. Fox, that was a very good question. And I looked previously at what the group had done with their budgets for a trial for major pharma. And I thought I was mistaken when I was reading what the total was. I thought it was for a visit or something and so forth, but it was for the whole trial. And my group just didn't know what they didn't know. And so as we move forward obtaining trials, obviously I want to get it right out of the gate. I do expect that we'll go back and forth with this issue. But my question to anyone out there is, where did the initial assumptions come from? You know, where did you get that budget that you're going to send that procedure for respectively $7? And I did receive $7 as some for the cost of some of that. I'm used to going back and forth. It's just part of what we do. And, you know, and again, that's just part of the process. It's nothing personal between any of the parties. It can take a while. And since I'm in the infancy stage of this, it may take a hot minute to get that finalized. But I don't want to miss out on anything here. And, you know, really, it's a matter of, are they leaving money on the table for the procedures we're actually performing? You know, and it again, it is a learning curve. But yes, it has been a surprise when I've seen that. And when I've researched trying to obtain where they got the initial base from, I have not been successful of finding out where that came from.
Do you ever run into that, Dan? Border town, expecting to pay you
No,
less
I
for
mean,
your
we're
budget?
still in the U.S. Like, they draw geographic boundaries on their maps, is what I've understood. We've had like, if you're in the U.S., you get paid like the U.S. sites, basically. In Mexico, like, they even use different teams, like Zane alluded to. I mean, his CRAs come from Mexico City, a 3-hour flight, by the way, when they can just literally walk across from San Diego, but it's like completely different department, different team.
Mhm.
This is one of the challenges for us why we haven't expanded into Mexico. I mean, it's not the physical distance, it's the philosophical distance, I guess, between the two countries. So it's very different world.
It's extremely different. And, you know, I do believe I can tell you post pandemic what I saw. So I sponsor an event at ASCP, used to be called NCDO for you old timers out there.
I
And
remember that.
yeah, you know, so I host the party, as I say. And at the last one a year ago, when I was Arizona, I was going around sniffing out saying, are you interested in going to Latin America? Are you interested in going? I'm going to be there. And, you know, I had a lot of people who with their drink and said, that's number 25 on our list, saying, flash 1 year forward, and I'm in the top 10. And, you know, of course, I had a great laugh with some of these individuals I've known for a long time. They said, guess where I'm coming? I go, you're going to Latin America. They said, how'd you know? I said, because you can't get the patients for the Ukraine and Russia anymore like you did, which were great patients, by the way, in psych. And so that is a loss for the data that we're having. But one by one, I'm getting calls. Seldom does a week go by where they're not expressing interest. And a lot of that's been referrals from all of you out there. And I really appreciate that as we're getting that information out. We will be bringing on some well-established talent that's well-known in the States coming up. Just kind of baiting everyone out there. I wish I could announce that, but I think you'll all be happy when you see that. But, you know, it's changed dramatically, and I'm welcoming that change. We're not going to take 10 trials this year. There's no interest in expanding it that fast, that quickly. I really want to nail down our infrastructure and our processes that we go through. But I am welcoming people that want to come by for a general evaluation to see us and talk about it. As we know, we're already in August. The year goes fast. You know, I'm looking at things that could start in the spring. You know, we have much more of an idea of what the competitive landscape is these days than we used to. There's not so many surprises of like, wow, they have that trial. We kind of knew about that trial coming.
Well,
I think we're learning more and more, especially lately, as we see what's happening with some of these companies that, you know, trying to grow and scale quickly in this field is maybe not the best strategy, right? Like we're seeing a bunch of people trip over themselves trying to win business and then not be able to deliver on it. So I applaud you for having a very purposeful, slow, stepwise growth, because I think a lot of people are sort of tempted to do otherwise, then end up regretting that decision.
Well, I would agree with you. And if I wanted to capsize and make my staff run away, I would bring on that many trials from various sponsors. I like the idea of having a well-established relationship with specific CROs to get the process down, get the budgets down, and they know what they can get from us. The same thing that I built the United States. For my personal model, and I still have a roster of PIs, excuse me, in the States, is I've never recruited a PI ever in my own roster, it's always been a referral. And that's been over the whole entire scan of where I've worked. And I've been really picky. It's never been a ginormous group. I think maybe it maxed at 15, and that was one site group that had multiple locations. So the history and relationship I have with my sponsors and PIs is decades. And they're not expecting any less from me. In fact, there is a little bit of heat in the kitchen, if you will. People are going to make that decision that we're going to Latin America. We know you, Zane. And I tell my staff internally, they're not going to call you if there's an issue. They're going to call me. It's like doing business with family. And I'm really grateful for that because, it has been a fantastic career for me in that way. But I've been really super picky about that. And I think that I'm going to continue to do that way. I feel like there's no rush for getting it right. I really want to see this work out well. Everybody is going to be there for that first dosing of a patient. I want the staff to learn, to watch and see why it's important. And also when we get a request from the States, why that request may be so urgent that you do need to do it that day, and educate them on what actually is not same day requests that they can breathe on. Because at this point, they're getting so many emails, so many calls, it can be a bit overwhelming, where to go. And so they'll say, well, we got to kick you back to Zane. So again, my structure is to nail down what we have committed to. And I feel very comfortable with saying we're well on our way to do that. We are. We have not dosed that first patient. I hope to see that by November. Cross your fingers out there that I dose these studies by the end of the year and that it's successful. I think that is an attainable goal. It's been taking about 3-4 months to get through the approvals. And actually the regulatory went quicker than I think the budget contract will. I know Dr. Fox and I have had some comments about this, but I think it wasn't the regulatory that's going to take longer. It's the acceptance of a border budget, if you will, and what that means and what the justification is for those salaries. Some of it I can't answer, but otherwise I can tell you again, the physicians are compensated as they would be in the States.
And that is fair market value. That is fair market value.
And the other thing too is, as flattered as I am that they want to come to Latin America, it's not all because of me. It's because they can't fill the studies that they have in the States. And I'm glad I can be a representative for that, an ambassador for that. I think that's phenomenal. I think I can carry it over the finish line. But a lot of opportunities we're being offered are very difficult trials, a lot of agitation and Alzheimer's, psychosis and Alzheimer's. Assistant living facilities, which I actually have here. We actually can do those trials here. And so some of the opportunities have been spurred from a lack of patient recruitment in the States, not necessarily because they just decided one day that they were going to come to Mexico. They had to, where can we get patients? And the proximity. This is your best bet is to do Latin America. You're attached to it in the United States. And I think that they're wrapping their head around that. And again, if you haven't been down to this area, it's dramatically different. The Mexican economy is booming. They are literally tearing down blocks in Tijuana, which if you've been here is not the worst thing to see. They're building new high rises, again, medical tourism. People are moving here from the States. They'll continue to move here from the States. Quality of life issues. There is no problem getting medical care here at all. And so again, I do feel with everything from the political climate in the United States may cause you to want to move, whatever your preference is. You may feel like you want to make a change. And if you're in Southern California, anywhere, it's a very easy move to do. I'm literally 35 minutes from the US border. I can cross back over anytime I want. And so if you're in the United States and you decide you want to move your family over here to have a little bit more space than being right next to somebody, maybe even on the coast, it's doable.
So I'm going to ask a question just from my own ignorance in terms of, getting a study up and going as a site in Mexico. Are there additional steps? Do you use the same central IRBs that we use, or are there extra submissions that are made to, Mexican regulatory authorities? This is something I know nothing about. So excuse my dumb question. But
no, it's not a dumb question. And there are questions that I ask daily as well. We do use central IRBs. We use Copernicus. We need for our regulatory submissions and so forth. I do believe we have a few extra steps involved, and I wish that my PI was on for that question. I think that she could have answered that more effectively than I. But Brad, same thing. Putting my mind around every little process that we have to go through. I wish I could specifically give you an example of that right now, but I'm at a loss for giving you one primary example.
No,
And I know it's taken about 3-4 months, which is less than what I was told.
I mean, there's plenty of academic sites that can't get done in twice that here in the U.S. So I mean, that's certainly nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a 6-month lead-in. To be honest, I thought it was going to be about that long. So if we can actually get up and running in 4 months, I think that's remarkable from what I've seen so far.
Zane could do it. Zane can do it quicker than the AMCs in Spanish than those AMCs can do in English.
Well, I'm hoping so, Dan, and I definitely will be hitting you up for some advice as we go along. As you know, I know we've tried to do your podcast as well with our doctors, and we would like to do that.
We got to do something. And look, Helen's comment, I was going to say, Brad, Helen Russo's comment, the diverse populations are mistrustful of U.S. medicine.
I was going to ask about this.
I mean, this is the business model, and it all boils down to money. Let's be real, everyone here, sponsors, they don't care about diversity. I mean, as much as they would never tell you this, they only started caring when the FDA said, no, we're not going to approve your drug unless you have X% African American, X% Latino.
It's not out of the goodness of their hearts.
It's not out of the goodness of their heart, regardless of what logo they're putting on their corporate logo that month. Okay, everything's for money. And what it boils down to is it cheaper to get this diversity from Latin America or get it in the US somehow? Or both, or a little bit of both. I don't know. I mean, nobody knows. This is why we need entrepreneurs. This is why I respect everyone on this panel. We all take risks every day, driving into uncertainty on a daily basis. And Zane, I applaud you you're a trailblazer, man. You're doing what no one's done.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And Helen, thanks for joining. Helen is a friend of mine as well. And it's a great question. Yeah, the population, are they trustworthy to the term clinical trial? Again, it's education. I did see when they were doing the COVID vaccines here, I thought it was pretty interesting. I saw lines that were miles long. And we would ask a few people in line, do you know why you're here? And they said, well, I know we're going to die if we don't get this vaccine, was something someone said. I go, interesting. And I said, do you know what a clinical trial is? And they had no idea whatsoever. Not one individual that I found in a line. And I actually did go down the line asking questions with my cohort who was full Spanish. No one that I talked to had an idea other than they were told that they needed to get this. They told a family member, a friend. I would say down in Mexico, the telephone game and the referral that he said, she said is very prominent here. Good and bad. Misinformation is also very heavy. You can sync it with what they think they've heard. And with regard to the states, Helen, is it mistrusting for certain patient populations? I think that it's the education as well. Again, at my own sites that I had, I did not have a strong Hispanic population. I did not have a strong Asian population. And was it because of distrust for that or the lack of exposure? Maybe they weren't seeing the TV ads or the radio or newspaper. I'm not sure. But I never had the diversity that we're seeking with the FDA.
Yeah, and I know, Helen, not everyone in the industry feels that way. Of course not. But I'm talking about at the board of director level at these big pharma, right? Mm-hmm. And they probably don't 100% feel that way too, but collectively the decisions are dictated by dollars. You can't tell me anything else. Nobody can. That's what it is.
Yeah, I guess in the backlung there, I would say, the people that we work with, our smaller group, it definitely is something they take so seriously. Does it have to do with money? I mean, give me a hammer, I'll fix it all. I mean, there's a lot of things I would do. I'd say money. Let me throw one out real quick. I do once a year rater certification. Can you imagine the money we would save on issues like that? Everyone that I do talk to that's doing an evaluation, though, they are talking about the diversity. It is definitely something that is mentioned casually or not casually on the phone with me. Obviously, the expectation is I'm giving you diversity down in Mexico, and I will meet that goal. But yeah, I do think there was a dramatic change. And what Helen's saying, We could have done it a long time ago. Like a lot of things in the field that we learned post-pandemic, we could have done telemedicine different. We could have done a lot of things different, but there was a vested interest in keeping things the same. And, not every town has diversity. You may get somewhere in the Midwest. I'm just using, for example, that is not your patient population. And, and then you're leaning towards the border and so forth. I feel that I'm in the right place at the right time for this. And I think that my education and support I have from the States is really going to foster the growth here. But yeah, it does feel trailblazing, and that's exciting to me. I feel like I did a lot of that in the field that we have currently. Even saying that, it's very flawed. We know that. But there's also some amazing things that have occurred with medicine now. The future of medicine looks so exciting. And I do believe, and I'd like to keep this group going on that, to educate you on what I learned and how quickly it's taken, and, how many more sponsors than last year are requesting Latin America this year, because I'm really tracking that. Again, last year it was calling everyone I knew. I'm here. Can you help me out? I know no one in Mexico City or no one in Mexico. And that's how it started. And, we did get that. But now I'm getting, whether it be in LinkedIn or so forth, random great individuals reaching out saying, hey, we do have a project that we're interested in, or can you guide me? And that's been great. And so that exposure is getting out there, word of mouth, even within our internal group. And thank you, everybody that has given the recommendation. Every call is important to me, and every call is returned. And, so anything that anyone else is hearing about it, let me know. Again, we do all indications. One of my primary focus was depression and schizophrenia, and we're not doing it yet. I do hope to see that by next year. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. But for anybody doing Alzheimer's that needs assisted living facilities that they cannot do in the States, and I am working on that, it's a great alternative to do it. In the future, some fun things that we're looking at is working within psychedelics. I am doing that in the States right now. And also, I feel that's very pioneering. It's been a personal interest for a decade. And now I'm seeing that put up. I think I'm involved, at least from a site side, on every psychedelic trial running. We did brand Baja Psychedelics to get it ahead of the curve. It's not really anything more than a name at this point. In my area, people have been coming down to this area I live for decades to do ketamine off-label, to do Avogadro, do all psychedelics down here for treatment. A lot of vets come over the border to get this treatment. And so it exists down here from a lot of doctors hearing about it. Can I bring it into the hospital today? No. It's nothing that they're going to want to do at this time. They're interested in it, but it's not the priority. And it's not legal here. It's not legal even for the trial at this point. There are some religious exceptions to doing some things for your ceremony, which is interesting. Someone suggested I start a church, which was really funny to me. But they were dead serious about it. They said, if it's a church, and I was like, that's very interesting, but I don't think we're going to go that direction. I pictured myself with a ceremony. It sounds like a lot of fun, but we're not going to do it that way right now. But in the future, I do. I mean,
the Church of Zane just sounds. I mean, the Church of Zane.
That's not the worst idea I've ever heard.
I didn't get a tax-free thing. They would never choose me on that. But, it's interesting. And I have been going over to see these facilities. And generally, they're run by Americans that came over here. And the thing, if anybody's worked within psychedelics, usually there's a story. I don't get calls saying, I'm going to open up a site because I want to do another SSRI. It's not like that. There are individuals that get on that say, my family member has been affected by this. And this is what, psilocybin has done for them. This is what all the other things have done for them. And they're very passionate. And that has what's fostered the development of those companies. It's very different. And quite frankly, it's refreshing. I love to hear their story, what made them passionate about getting in it, because that passion is what's going to drive that company. There was a little bit of a drying up of that this year on psychedelics specifically. I think some of the sponsors said, well, let's let people like that are running out there like MindMed, Cybin, Compass Pathways, get through their data, and let's take a look at it next year. I had a lot of people that were in the gate ready to go, but a lot of times they're underfunded. They've had advice that's not necessarily the best advice about what it's going to take to do the trial. I went to Wonderland last year, that convention down in Miami, and I think I ruined the night for a couple of people. They were up there saying, we're going to get our phase 1 done for $2 million. We're going to get this through. And I was just sitting, and again, I wonder, where is this information coming from? And, I said, well, who advised? Well, we know. And they said, well, how do you know? I said, well, I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it right now. And I'd love to give you free advice, but $2 million is not going to carry you through. And I had one guy got very upset about it and said some colorful words and stormed off. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. The next day he came back and apologized. He said, look, I'm sorry. It's so stressful to try to raise money. And anybody that's done that, we know how stressful it is to get the money. Somebody advised that it would take that much to do. They went to their investors for that amount of money, and they're hearing now they can't do it. And so there's a lot of stories about that right now. A lot of people are starting their psychedelic research in the UK or Australia. I'm working with companies over there that are doing phase 1. And if the phase 1 looks good, they're hoping to bring it back to the States. So most of that is happening overseas. Most of it. There are phase 1 and psychedelics running here. But at this point, usually it's more very small group of one single site for phase 1. If you're doing that with psychedelics, we're not into the big phase 3s yet. I can't wait, but we're not quite there. Obviously, major pharma, it'd be wonderful if they'd sign on to this. If you got a Merck, Pfizer, Lilly that thought this compound was good, I think it would take us faster. But right now, it's inching along. It's on track. The people that are enrolling their trials are actually enrolling their trials. And I see Leanne is asking a question, will they come up with their pricing? That is a great question. Well, I don't know. I hope, Leanne, because again, the budgets I'm seeing that are coming forward for the psychedelics, one of the things that's my biggest fear for this is the sites don't have an internal database of psychedelic patients. We don't have it. No one knows. They can guesstimate how many patients it's going to take to screen to get in. Well, what I'm finding out already, it's taking a lot more than people anticipated. A lot of what I've seen is it actually has not been necessarily honest about their psychedelic use. There's some pretty lofty restrictions for people to do this. Sometimes they don't want them to ever have done it. Other times you have to be off your antidepressant. There's a lot of variables in there. But I do go back to saying they're underfunded. And there are companies that are going to attempt to do this without advertising out there.
Fair.
I'm optimistic, but I can tell you the ones that have filled right now are advertising. They are advertising for patients. There's some sophisticated advertising compounds.
So hold on. So Zane, I think that a psychedelics podcast may be a good section to discuss this. I hate to tack it on to the end of another one.
That's good. Let's go back to that. We'll get Angela Hargrove on that one if she's listening. I'll pull her back for that. Well, I get segued off that because it's a compassion for the patients as well. But going back to Latin America, let's finish on that. Where we are today is the very exciting stage. For me, winning the trial is exciting. For the staff, it's never as exciting because they have to run it. But I'm like, wow, we got accepted. They're like, okay, and that's the same way in the States as well. I'm engaged to find that opportunity for them. And, and again, it's really exciting to me. I have a bell that I ring when it's awarded and we get accepted. It's the little things. But I do believe that I'm going to be ringing a lot more bells here. And, again, where we're doing well as neurology is something that I think right now that I do have the patient population for MS. I do have it for Alzheimer's. Our CEO is a pain specialist. I would love to throw that in the mix as well. But there isn't one opportunity we won't review. At this point, I'm not interested in doing adolescents at all. And I've been showered with adolescent opportunities, and again, they can't fill it in the States. It's not necessarily that they want to come here for that. But at this point, as a company at Baja Clinical Trials, we're not going to work with adolescents, at least in the near future.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Well, Zane, we're past the end of the hour. Let's, I'd like to have you come on, been another 6 months or so, kind of catch up on your progress. And in the meantime, to Dr. Fox's point, I mean, I'm interested, again, I don't know a lot about psychedelics other than my own my own dalliances, but I'm certainly interested in learning more. So maybe we book something for that. But otherwise, man, I really want to thank you.
I love it. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody that I know that logged in. I appreciate everyone's so busy. It was great to see those acceptance and from people that I really respect out there. And for new friends I'm making, reach out with questions. Phil, please hit me with LinkedIn or whatever we need to do to get your question, because there's probably a question that I need to ask. And so if you're thinking of it, thank you for being proactive. And thanks so much for putting this together today, guys. And I appreciate it. If you're in this area, hit me up. I'd love to see you.
All right, boys. Until next time.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Zane. Thanks.